There we go. Thank you, everybody. Just a quick thumbs up that you can see my screen and it's there and everything. Perfect. I think through COVID, everyone's learned just to double check that they're not on mute, their camera's on, that you can share the screen. So thanks, Bev, for the introduction. So my name is Adam Barnes. I'm the founder of Roma Barnes Consultancy. We are a chamber member and we were invited to do this through conversations with Bev and some of the other team there once I shared what we do, and that's why we're here today. So I thought I'd start off just by kind of saying who we are a little bit. And we are a specialist bid writing consultancy. My background is I used to be a teacher, so we tend to work in further education and employability, but we have supported organisations in various different sectors. We've worked with construction companies, facilities management, which is cleaning to you and me. We've worked with health and social care providers and various different businesses. And we develop proposals and we help them to tender for new contracts, be that private or public sector. We've done work with charities as well for their grant funding. And alongside all of that, we've written award applications for training providers for entering things like Apprentice of the Year, Training Provider of the Year, and all sorts of things. And then the final string to our bow, I suppose, is that we support with marketing and social media. And that's one of the reasons why, awards events like this are so vital for local businesses, because of the publicity, the brand awareness. Even being shortlisted in something like this really helps get that boost of public consciousness around your organization. So what we're hoping to do today is obviously make you aware of the awards, kind of share what they're all about, and then give you some pointers on, if you do decide to go ahead, what you need to include in your actual application. So I touched on this a little bit about, why enter the awards. And I think that the fact that you've all joined this call today, or you'll be viewing this at a later date, kind of shows that you already got that interest. And I think that a lot of the point of entering the award is to win, obviously. But if you don't win, there are still wins that you can take away from that. And I think that the actual application process will help your organisation to actually understand what you're good at and what you can go out and shout about. And it will then support things like attracting new customers. It will put you as the sort of leading organisation in your sector, and working with the chamber and being recognised by the chamber. It opens up new markets, even if it's just within other chamber members who see, oh, that's the finalist in this category, or that's the finalist in that category. And there's a lot that you can do through this process that will actually inform some of your marketing, some of your sales, some of your bids and tendering, and the awards actually give you that chance to consolidate all of that knowledge. When you're actually thinking about entering the awards, obviously you need to look at the actual structure. And I think that this is where a lot of organisations that I've worked with in the past have maybe not necessarily approach this as an actual a formal application, and it's been very much storytelling. So what I always encourage clients to do is to sit down and actually, like you would with a story or a report or whatever, have a clear structure to things where you've got a start, a middle and an end, and each one of those points, and the bullet points that I've outlined here, and you're backing them up. So it's not just about saying something like, oh, we are the best education consultancy in the East Midlands. Well, okay, great. What makes you say that? So I think that the evidence of achievement, the third bullet point there, is really, really important. You'll hear me talk about that a little bit more. One of the other bullet points on this slide that I think is really key is actually being confident enough to say why you should win. A lot of organisations that I've worked with, especially when they're looking at awards, kind of go, well, we're okay at this. Actually, it's there for you to celebrate your business and to really put across what your organisation is good at and blow your own trumpet. No one else is going to do it for you. Everyone at the chamber may know your business. You might have a strong enough brand that it gets recognised around Derbyshire or Nottinghamshire or Leicestershire, and people understand it. But don't be afraid to actually say why you should deserve to win this award or whatever category you're going into, and think about how you're going to evidence that and sort of substantiate your claims. Use things like testimonials, use quantifiable, actually this is what we've delivered. And I'll come on to how you can do that a little bit more, but the main purpose of this slide is to actually encourage people to sit down and plan. Everyone's heard the saying preparation prevents poor performance. It's exactly the same when you're writing an award application. You do need to actually think about that rather than just launching in and sort of going gung-ho at the questions. Have a little bit of time to plan it, think through what it is you're trying to get out of it, and actually, almost bullet point how you're going to approach each question. One thing that I won't have time to do in this is to actually go through all of the questions in all of the categories. There are some common questions across each category, so I'll try and talk about them. But what I'm hoping to do is actually have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So if anyone has got any questions, we'll try and pick that up towards the end. So that's a little bit about the actual structure. What I'd like to do is to kind of talk through a little bit about what judges are going to be looking for. Now, cards on the table, I'm not a judge. I've got no influence on the evaluation. Bev, I don't know if you're, able to share a little bit about who are going to be the judging panel, because I know that we had a conversation and, you kind of gave me some advice. Maybe you could just give a bit of a clue there.
Yeah, so the judging panel, the shortlisting will be done by our senior management team internally at the chamber. And then the judging panel will be a member of our board, another member of management, and a member of the sponsor of the category. So there'll be up to 3 people on the judging panel, which will be taking place in January next year. The shortlisting will be happening in September, and the judging will actually happen in January next year.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that's really important for people to keep that in mind, because when you are writing your applications, you need to keep in mind that not everybody on that evaluation panel will know your industry specific jargon or the acronyms or any particular technical terms that you may use. So whenever I'm writing applications or bids or tenders, in the back of my mind, I always kind of go, would my mum understand this? Someone who's not in the sector, doesn't know what I do. And actually, if I'm using, there's loads of jargon in education, but if I'm using some of those acronyms, is a lay person from off the street going to be able to understand what I'm saying? So if you are an engineering company, for example, and you're used to talking in very technical terms, actually think about using plain English, because the judges are going to be looking for an answer that is not necessarily easy to read, but clearly addresses the question clearly. So what we don't want is a lot of jargon, a lot of acronyms being chucked in there that make it a little bit more tricky to understand what's going on. The other thing that judges are going to look for is actually, can you back up what you're saying? So if you are the biggest supplier of hammers in Nottingham, well, how many hammers do you sell each year? How many hammers did your nearest competitor sell? And you can use those kind of statistics to evidence things like that. The other thing that judges are going to look for is the actual impact of your organisation within the business community or within the wider community. So that doesn't necessarily have to be a quantifiable, well, we've taken on 8 new members of staff. It may be that actually, do you make sure that all of your supply chain is within the East Midlands? Rather than going out to London to buy your stationery, do you get it from Loughborough, for example? And things like that, and show how your organisation is linked to the East Midlands business community is really, really key. Obviously, the final bullet point here kind of links back to what I was saying in the previous slide about the structure. So having a clear narrative that runs through from start to finish, very much like a story, is going to be key, because that will take the judges through your application, and it will actually take them on that journey. Now, the key thing to do is make sure that this doesn't just turn into a sales pitch. A lot of awards applications that I've read that have been written by clients have basically been a marketing spiel, and while yes, there is a space for that, you do need to make sure that anything that you say is actually going to be evidenced, and you can actually back up the claims that you're making. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into what the judges are going to look for, and then you can obviously tailor your response accordingly. So, oh, I don't know what I've just done there. I've just pressed something. Oh, there we go. Right, no, it's fine. So when I talk about evidencing your claims, this is some of the stuff that I would normally do. So obviously the first point on there is, if it's your opinion, fine. If you can measure it against something that's tangible, that's what you need to be doing. So opinion presented as fact, while it can be convincing if used sparingly, try and avoid it, because if you make too many of those claims and you present too many of them as fact, the judges are going to look at it and go, really? Are you sure about that? An example of that is, again, I'll use education because that's where I come from, but I talk a lot about training providers and their pass rates for exams. If every training provider said 100% of our learners pass, you're not going to believe them. So it's about using relevant facts and, you know, growth percentages of your business. So has your turnover increased from last year to this year? Do you have a Trustpilot score? You know, things like that that you can actually put in there that say, we've got the best customer service as evidenced by our 4.9 on Trustpilot from 12,000 reviews. Things like that actually really back up what you're saying with tangible evidence that can't necessarily be manipulated. So using, again, I'll go back to education. I think most people will understand, if you've had an Ofsted report, if you're saying that your Ofsted report is outstanding, you can't fake that. So independent verification. And I know that each industry will have that. So in health and social care, you'll have CQC, things like that. You can put those in there as well. If you haven't got figures or you haven't got anything like that, you can use percentage increases. So rather than say turnover last year was 250,000, this year it's 500,000. If you don't want to share that information, use a percentage to show that growth or to show that trend. You know, you can use comparative data to actually say, well, you know, our timely completion rate for this kind of construction work, you know, we don't have any delays, 100% is on time. Our closest competitor, their timely completion rate is only 80% and they miss their deadlines. If it's factual, use it. If it's being like anecdotal evidence that you've got of, oh, you know, Joe Blogg's fencing is always late to, don't include that kind of stuff. But if there's actual evidence and figures that put your organization in a better light compared to your competitors, make sure that that's what you're doing, because using that evidence really does beef up whatever words you're going to say. Make sure it's relevant though. That's the final bullet point on here, because if you're going to put in an application to these business awards and you're including evidence that actually doesn't make any sense, it can have the opposite effect, and it detracts and it kind of diverts attention away from what you're actually trying to say. So just have that little think and go, does this really support the point that we're trying to make? So I would suggest definitely doing that. Now, in terms of recommendations, I think that, you know, a lot of people look at this and they go, we can do that in a day. You probably could, but it probably won't be the best. So make sure that you've got plenty of time for preparation and drafting. Now, I normally suggest going through 1, maybe 2 drafts for something like this. So you've got your first draft, you do an internal check, you do a second draft, then you're not necessarily changing for content, you're changing for style, and then that leads into the final version. When you have got your final version, get someone else to read it as well, and kind of go, right, this is the question, this is our answer. Do we actually answer all of the points in this question? Because you'll be surprised at how many times the person writing thinks they've addressed every single point in the question, and they kind of go, I use the phrase going bid blind. You know, you're the one that's writing it, you know what you meant, but actually that doesn't always come through in that final answer. So make sure that you've got that in there and you have included the evidence, you've adopted that storytelling approach, and get someone else to read it. That will help you with the type of language you're using, the actual jargon or acronyms. And again, go back to it. Could my mum understand this? If I gave this to her, would she know what I'm saying? So my recommendations are very much around preparation, having a clear structure, and don't be afraid to delegate. If you're the person that's actually in charge of the overall application, but there's a question that you're not going to be the best to answer, pass it on to your finance director, give it to your HR person, let your marketing person actually look at the wording to make sure that all of that flows and it is a cohesive response. So if you do delegate, absolutely fine, give it to the specialists in your business, but then get someone else to read it, because my writing style will be different to Bev's, will be different to everybody else's. So you kind of just need to make sure that it is coherent and cohesive all the way through. Some of the common pitfalls. The second one is a particular bugbear of mine, missing the word count. So I do a lot of this, and I do a lot of bid writing. And if you're writing in Word, for example, and then you're pasting your answer into an online form, sometimes they will have different ways of counting words. So a common issue that I have is that on some online forms, if you use a line break and you just drop it down so that the paragraphs are easier to read, it counts as an extra word. So just make sure that you allow yourself enough time to do that. And again, time is the other thing here. You cannot submit late. And I know that at the end of this, Bev's going to recap on all of the deadlines, but do not let yourself run out of time. The other thing on there as well is to actually, what can you actually submit? So are you allowed to submit supporting evidence? Are you allowed to include images? Check the guidance. And I'm talking here generally about all award applications, making sure that you've got that kind of, are we compliant with what we're being asked to provide? So they're kind of the common sense things. The other thing that I thought is worth mentioning is not actually remembering that, your business, it is a business, but behind the business are people. So you can talk about that human element in the application. And, I do it quite a lot when putting organizations forwards for like training provider of the year or apprentice of the year, actually talking about the journey that person has been on. So some of the I'll shout her out. It's a lady called Eve, she was named Apprentice of the Year for a company that I work with called Kingdom Academy. She works in the housing sector, but her personal journey and included some of the barriers that she had to overcome to actually continue her studies. She had to go through extra bits and pieces, and that's the human story behind the actual impact that she made. Now, each business is going to have their own human element to it. So I can't really sit here and tell you, oh, you should include this or you should include that, because that's what makes your business your business. So as well as saying, these are all our fantastic numbers and this is our growth and this is how many new clients we've brought on, well, actually talk about what that has led to as well. So yes, we've grown by 75% year on year. Yes, we've secured 20 new clients, but actually that's allowed us to take on 2 new employees. And actually those 2 new employees are both apprentices. One of them comes from a care background. Things like that helps your story to resonate emotionally as well as with the actual evidence as well. So it's a balancing act, and I always describe it as it's part art, part science. And the sciencey part is where you've got your numbers and your data, and then the art part is the human element and that emotional connection that people can have to your business, and that provides the authenticity as well. So we're a small business. We employ sort of 5 people plus me, so 6 of us. But over the last 5 years that I've been in business, we've kind of added slowly to that, and it's about that growth. And we're about to take on someone else, and you kind of go, well, that's the type of story that we want to hear in these award applications. It's, yes, you're a fantastic business, but what else is there, and how else is that having a positive impact? I did want to this isn't going to be a massive sales pitch because I promised Bev it wouldn't be, but because we've had the conversation, we're more than happy to support any organisation who does want to actually apply, and maybe you haven't got the time, maybe you've not got the internal capacity. It is the summer, people are on holidays, maybe you need an extra pair of hands. Roma Barnes are able to support with that, and whether that is a full end-to-end like writing service where we sit down with you, we have a chat, and we take control of that, or actually some organisations will be more than happy doing that themselves, and they just want a review. So I've put our contact email address on there, and if you get in touch and you use the code Chamber Awards 25, you'll get a 25% discount off of the cost of that. So thank you to Bev for allowing me to kind of plug that in there. The next steps here, and this is my final slide before I hand back over to Bev. The deadline is the 19th of September. So I would be suggesting to people that you look to submit 17th, 18th of September at the latest. You've still got plenty of time. You've got a month or so to kind of get that in. But I would start by setting out your timelines and work backwards. So if you are going to submit on the 17th, which I believe is a Wednesday, so you want to make sure that the final review is done on the Monday so that you've got that ready on the Tuesday to submit. So, and work back like that and allow yourself enough time. Obviously, all of the award categories, FAQs, and any other information about how you submit, Bev's going to go through in a second, but they are available on the website. So for anyone who's not on this call, that's the link that you can click, and I think you should be able to click it through the slides that Bev will send out afterwards. Have a look at that and make sure that you've allowed yourself enough time. And talking of time, I think I'm pretty much bang on time. So if I stop sharing and we kind of come back as a group there, I'll hand over to Bev and she can just finish off before we go into any Q&A.
Thanks, Adam. That was amazing. Some really, really useful hints and tips there, which hopefully everybody else has found quite useful. There was a comment in the chat, as Adam has also said, the slides will be sent round afterwards. So don't worry if you've been scribbling away and you've missed something. They will be sent round so everybody has got a copy of them. Also, as Adam says, the deadline is the 19th of September for submissions, which is 5 weeks today. So plenty of time still to get it out there, but bear in mind that that is the last and final deadline for submissions as we go straight into shortlisting after the deadline, and which will be done, as I said, by the senior management team internally at the Chamber. And then all the finalists will be announced at the President's Celebration, which is happening at the 9th of October at Renaissance at Kelham Hall. So tickets are on sale for that. So if you want to see if you were a finalist on the night exclusively and hear it first, then that's where the finalists will be announced. Obviously, they will be announced afterwards externally on all our marketing channels and everything. But that's where you will hear where the finalists are firsthand. And as I said earlier, the awards nights are February and March 2026. In Leicester, Nottingham and Derby accordingly. So lots of dates for your diaries. So keep an eye out on your emails and our socials and website for further information. And I'm sure your account managers will fill you in on all that as well if you have any questions. Saying question, does anybody have any quick questions for Adam whilst we have him on the call? Just unmute yourself if you do have one. Oh, stun them into silence, Adam. They know everything.
Silence is golden. So I've either done a very, very good job, or people are just sat there going, wow. But yeah, hopefully it's the fact I've done a good job. But like I say, my email address is on those slides. So if anyone does have any questions that they think of over the weekend or they want to get in touch, it's info@romabarnes.com.
Perfect. One last thing, all the submissions are done via a portal called Awards Force. There is a link to that on all of the application details on the website. So go to the Business Awards web pages on the Chamber website, click on the relevant counter that you fall into, and then each of the categories are on there. And then there's a little button that says submit your application, and that will take you through to the portal where all the information is. If you don't have a login for that, it's very quick, it's very simple. Email address, password, and then I think it sends you a link back to verify that it's you, and then away you go. And then all the information is in there. It's all kind of like drop down menus as well. There's an FAQ document on there. But again, if you have any questions, speak to your account manager or email myself at the events inbox. I'll put that on the email that I send out. So please don't struggle if you have any questions. Eleanor's just copying in a link there. Thank you very much. Please don't struggle if you have any questions. Reach out to a contact at the Chamber. If you do want to take Adam up on his offer of help with writing or reviewing of the submissions, I highly recommend that you do that. Just gets a fresh set of eyes as well on things that might be able to suggest things that you haven't thought of, or take out things that might not be relevant and all that kind of thing. So please do reach out to us. We are here to help. I shall wrap things up then. So as I say, if nobody's got any questions, that's brilliant. We've stunned you all into silence, but in a good way. Thank you so much for everybody coming along. Hope to see you all at the awards nights in January, in February and March even, and at the President's celebration in October, when we'll find out who your finalists are. So thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.